let's talk about the summit, rather the Netroots Nation 2025. First, what is it? Netroots Nation is a 501 organization. I think both a C3 and C4 components. It is a aggregation of all progressives in the country, meaning writers, meaning authors, meaning activists, meaning people, businesses that are making products to make activism easier. In fact, we have a couple of interviews with folks that do that now using AI and other things. Also, we have politicians, progressive politicians that show up, as well as sometimes a few moderate politicians show up to Netroots Nation 2025. This year was no different. There's one thing different from this year, and that was Schumer wasn't there. Hakeem Jeffries wasn't there. None of the people that we would consider the rank and file, well, how should I call them? The establishment Democrats. None of them were there. And this is something you shouldn't have to be invited to. If you know the core of your base is going to be there, you would think that you would be there. Beto showed up. Beto O'Rourke showed up. Maybe he's going to make a run. I don't know if any of you saw the interviews that I did with Beto. In fact, let me go ahead and stick a link to that interview that I did with Beto in the chat, because I tell you, it was a good interview. And I think I actually broke some news in that interview, because in that interview, I think it became rather clear that Beto is not ruling out either a presidential run. Actually, he's going through red states after red state after red state. Or for that matter, is he ruling out a Texas gubernatorial? I asked him, and he could have said no. But I want you to listen to that interview on exactly how he answered the question when I kind of urged them on to what's happening in Texas right now. So I interviewed Beto. I also interviewed the Supreme Court Justice of what is the place? North Carolina. She won her election, but the Republican challenged it, and she won by 700 something votes. They challenged it for 6 months, and they finally had to concede. She won. This woman is a fighter. The Supreme Court Justice Riggs is her name. Allison Riggs. I interviewed her. That interview is already posted on our Substack as well. Check it out. I put the link in there as well. I think it's an interview we want to see. Tonight, I'm going to put up another interview when I'm done here and process that interview, write up the pieces for it. I interviewed the Attorney General of Minnesota, the guy that I said saved Minnesota from going into outright catastrophe. And that is Keith Ellison. And Keith Ellison gave an excellent interview. Look out for that. It's going to be dropping tonight. I also interviewed our Pacifica Network hero, Pacifica Network idol, Amy Goodman. Amy Goodman sat down with me for quite a while, and we had some chats, remembered a few things that we did. We used to pitch together at Pacifica Network stations often. And anyway, she gave a great interview that I'm going to be posting sometime this week as well. She did a great thing. Her speech was one of the best speeches that was given as a keynote at Netroots Nation 2025. And one of the reasons is her main topic was to illustrate how the mainstream, how necessary the independent media is. And she contrasted the reporting from independent media and mainstream media. Excellent comparison that she did. And of course, I actually have to be pleased to say that while on that stage, she gave Politics Done Right and our station, yours truly, a big shout out from the stage. I'll probably, in fact, let me go ahead and play that out for you. Let me see if I can find it on YouTube, because I cut it out this morning while I was sitting at the airport, because I couldn't go to the keynote speaks, because I set up the internet for Radio Row and I had to pull it down. And while I was pulling down that internet, that we all used to do our broadcasting, etc., she was already on stage. And while I'm pulling wires and all this stuff, I get an email. I get a call first. Hey, Egberto, Amy Grant just gave you a shout out in front of the entire convention. And I was like, oh, really? Okay, thank you, Amy. I appreciate that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play that little segment. But later on, I have a lot of segments that I want to pull from her speech because it was prescient. Now, this one is a bit self-serving because, it makes you feel rewarding, right? Because we busted our butts out there at Netroots getting to talk to all these people, and we needed to get this out. And guess what? I think when you see the quality of the interviews, the quality of the people talking, and the quality of what they have to say, you're going to say, well, you know what? We've left here knowing a little bit more. We've left here knowing that we can actually get this stuff done, right? And that's what it's all about, getting this stuff done. So let me play this section here for you, and let's take it then on. Let's do that. Check this out. I think I got to do it like, how do I do it? Like this. Okay, there we go. Bear with me, guys.
Weekdays live at 7 a.m. There is independent media that's thriving here and all over the country. It just needs your support because it is people powered. Now, I'm going to speak super fast. I come from Pacifica Radio, which was founded in 1949 out in the Bay Area in California by a man named Lou Hill. He was a war resistor, came out of the detention camps, and then said there has to be a media outlet that is not run by corporations that profit from war, but by journalists and artists. And that's how Pacifica Radio was born. As George Gerbner, the late dean of the Annenberg School of Communications, would say, not run by corporations that have nothing to tell and everything to sell, that are raising our children today. And so KPFA went on the air in 49, KPFK in Los Angeles in 59, my station in New York, WBAI in 60, where you'd hear debates between Malcolm X and James Baldwin, the effectiveness of nonviolent civil disobedience, PFW in Washington in 77. And Egberto is here from KPFT doing nonstop interviews as well. KPFT went on the air in 1970. Within weeks, the Ku Klux Klan strapped dynamite to the base of the transmitter and blew it to smithereens. When they got back on their feet a few weeks later, rebuilt the transmitter, the Klan strapped 15 times the dynamite to the base of the transmitter and blew it up again. It would take months before they could rebuild. I think it was blown up in the middle of Arlo Guthrie singing Alice's Restaurant, and I thought that was a good song. But anyway, January of 1971, they went back on the air. Arlo Guthrie came back to Houston to finish his song, and it has been broadcasting ever since. I can't remember if it was the Grand Dragon or the Exalted Cyclops, because I often confuse their titles, but he said it was his proudest act. I think that's because he understood how dangerous Pacifica is, how dangerous independent media is. Dangerous because it allows people to speak for themselves. And when you hear someone speaking from their own experience, it breaks down the bigotry and caricatures. When you hear a Palestinian child crying out for food or their mother, when you hear an Israeli grandmother, when you hear an uncle in Afghanistan or an aunt in the South Bronx, it challenges what you know. You don't have to agree, but it makes it much less likely that you'll want to destroy the person. I think the media can be the greatest force for peace on earth. Instead, all too often, it's wielded as a weapon of war, which is why we have to take the media back. Now, part of that is ensuring that people can speak for themselves, which takes me to Israel's war on Gaza.
Okay, that part I will bring in some other blogs, but what I wanted to show is that she gave a full-throated support of KPFT, full-throated support of all these Pacifica Network stations. And let me tell you, the station that was blown off the air is my station, the KPFT 90.1 station that we broadcast from every morning at 6 a.m. Central Time. And we have in our, in sort of our area of the station, the museum of our station, the transmitter that was blown up with dynamites. The first time with a few pounds, the second time with 15 times or so more the amount of explosives that they used to bring down the tower to take us off air. And you know what? It's 2025. We're 50 odd years old and we're still on the air. And of course, we've migrated to the internet by way of YouTube, by way of Substack, by way of Facebook Live, by way of Twitch Live, by way of Instagram, by way of TikTok, etc. Because independent media will find every possible way to get it. No limits, no barriers. Where is this? Actually, I'm back in Houston. No limits, no barriers. I just flew back in this afternoon from New Orleans. I was there since Wednesday, interviewing many folks. These interviews that you're going to see subsequently. In fact, I've already dropped the interview with Beto O'Rourke, and you can go. I put the link in the chat already. You can also see the interview with Allison Riggs, who is a Supreme Court justice in North Carolina, who won her race, but it took 6 months to get. And of course, tonight, I'm going to drop the Keith Ellison. He's the Attorney General of Minnesota, who pretty much saved Minnesota from a probably an entire riot. So you'll see that interview with us tonight. And I have several other interviews that I'll be, as I process them, clean them up, I'll post them in the Substack that you normally receive in your email, that's then placed on our website out here. So all of that is coming, and I think you're going to find them quite enlightening. Okay, so one of the things that I mentioned to most of you listening is that some of the protagonists like Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries were nowhere to be found. And the thing about it is you wanted to be there because those activists that are there are the ones that are controlling the email products that are going to be contacting people to do the work. It's the activists that are going to be out there on the floor in the different districts of these Republicans that need to be addressed. These are the people there. It's a people working on fair elections. These are the people. It's the executive directors. It's the activists on the ground. These are the people that were there. Over 3,000 of these people from all over the country that do the grunt work of progressive politics. That's who was there day in and day out between Wednesday and today. And not one establishment Democrat that I can think of the likes of Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. But you know who was there? Congresswoman Delia Ramirez. She was there. You know else who was there? State Rep from Tennessee, Justin Pierce. I interviewed both of them, Martinez and Justin Pierce. All right, David, John, how are you doing today?
I'm fine. I just wanted to say that, Chuck Schumer, the Democrats in New York State created, gerrymandering in favor of the Republicans. They are so worried that progressives might get more, get power, that they actually sabotaged the Democratic Party.
Yes,
we would
did.
have almost, yes. And, we just have to carry on because, eventually they're going to be dust in history and the progressives will take over the Democratic Party. And it is very dependent on people like Keith Ellison. Keith Ellison risked his own position. He remanded the case to himself and prosecuted it rather than leave it to the Hennepin County prosecutor, because if he didn't, Chauvin would have gone free.
Exactly.
And there would have been a big marriage of justice. So I'm very proud of him, and that was wonderful.
You're going to see the interview that I do with him tonight. It's funny because every time I talk to Keith, I would always start the conversation like, man, America doesn't know the gratitude that they owe you for the way you handled that case. And he always kind of shy away or blush or whatever, But
he's very modest.
Right.
Yes.
He handled it masterfully the way he handled that event. So you're going to see you guys are going to love the Keith Ellison interview, not about the stuff that happened with the cops, but about corporatocracy and so forth. You're going to love the interview. As soon as we're done with this tonight, I'm going to go finish that vlog that I started to write while I was in New Orleans. So I think hold your shirts. It's coming out tonight. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just wanted to say one more thing. Jamal Bowman, who was an excellent and he was gerrymandered out of his own district by the Democrats. So we need to get rid of these people. I'm sick of them. I've been a progressive all my life, and I'm 69, and that's how I've voted, all my life. It's always been, the progressives, we have to put up with the corporate Dems, but no more. I mean, it's moving in a direction. Started with Bernie Sanders and maybe even before, and he won this state handily by 11%. the first time. And, the powers that be just, they undid his campaign. But we have plenty of young people. This Riggs, she's a wonderful person. I mean, there's so many young people, excellent, smart, and capable, that can do it. And, that's what we have to do. I would love to see the progressives really take power over the party, because that's what people want. And they have actual things that would help ordinary people. And that's the way it's always been, ordinary people taking power.
Well, thank you for your call, John. And I think Mandami is going to win. I mean, he even have great support, even as they're trying to slam him as a racist, and they're trying to hit him for being a Muslim. Even have strong Jewish support in New York. That should tell you something. Thank you so kindly for your call, John. You have a wonderful rest of your day. And folks, like John, anybody who wants to call in and change the subject or want to add something to the discussion, feel free to give us a call, and I'll put that number in the chat. It's 281-823-7747. Again, that number is 281-823-7747. Feel free to give a call if there's something that you want to add to the discussion. Anyhow, so let me give you a sort of a makeup of the people that I interviewed. Like I said, Beto O'Rourke. We also had Allison Riggs, who is the Supreme Court Justice of North Carolina. We had, what's her name? Miss Ramirez, Congresswoman, what is her? Deborah Ramirez Delia Ramirez from the Chicago area. We also have the Secretary of State of Connecticut, Stephanie Thomas. She gave a good interview as far as what the changes Donald Trump is doing, the effect it'll have on her state, Connecticut, that is. We interviewed, of course, Amy Goodman was one of our interviewees. It's a lot more. I can't remember them all, but I think at the end you're going to sit back and say, wow, we did a good job to get some of this message out and to be able to move it in many different directions. Amy Goodman is probably one of the best journalists ever. Yeah, there is a clip from her keynote speech, John, that I'm going to, if I'm not too sleepy tonight, I'm going to cut out, because it shows you the difference between independent media and corporate media. And she used the dropping of the atomic bomb to illustrate that reality. It's so important. And later on, she would use the kind of coverage that we have in Palestine as an example as well. It is just an example, a prescient example of why it is essential that we have independent media. It doesn't matter what folks say. And when I say independent media, I don't mean just somebody that sits down and write a few pages and call themselves journalists. You got to go out there and really get the pulse of people where they are, talk to the people, let them know that you want their message out, and also let them know that for every one of you that are listening to me right now, right? For every one of you that are listening to me, you have a point of view. And, many a times these points of views go unheard because, well, you're a mom. You don't have time to do certain things. You're a dad. You get home, you're busy, you're tired. And a lot of times, you don't, and you think that, well, I think that, and you don't realize that thought belongs to your one thought, your one way of being is what hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Americans are feeling. But because of this way that we have been coerced into, called rugged individualism, we go ahead and we keep all of this to ourselves. And when the mainstream media wants to get a narrative out, they select the people who they believe will tell the narrative that they want. And as Amy would tell you, Amy Goodman, that is, she would tell you, no, you have to get the voices of the people to see where the people really are. We try to do that. We may get hassled because we put on right-wingers. We may push back on them, but we put on everybody, because you would hear some right-wingers call the show in the morning, the 6 o'clock show, Central Time, and they would say something, and I'll stop and I'll say, actually, you know what? On that particular point, you're absolutely right. That is how you actually get the best type of changes. That is how you get a democracy that everybody believes in. That is how you get a society that makes people happy. You know why Denmark is one of the happiest countries? Because that's the method they have followed. And John is correct. You have to go out in the streets. It's funny because I would be in the airport and I may overhear a conversation, and I would go ahead and say, "Hey, that's good. Can we talk about that?" And that's how I did that. That is how I got the last Netroots interview. 2 women passing by me, and one just said they were talking about some political thing, and then they said, "Oh, you were at Netroots Nation," because they saw the T-shirt. I came home in this T-shirt. And I'm like, yes. And then they started talking, and I said, and by the way, what were you doing? The girl said, "Oh, I was one of the panelists." I said, "What panel was that?" On gerrymandering and getting people to effectively for everyone to get effective representation. And right then and there, I said, look, we were right at the gate. We were at the customs. So we hadn't gone into customs yet. So I told them, "Would you be willing to talk to me?" And then they said, yes. And then I said, look, we got to go through custom. Please wait for me in case you get through before me. And they said they would. On the day that I am having people wait for me for an interview behind the lines, they asked me to take my shoes off. Something rings in my jeans. Nothing was found, but everything went haywire as I tried to get through custom. So it took me 10 minutes to get through something that should take me 2 minutes. And they stayed there and they waited. And I went out there and I did that interview, and it was likely the best interview I have ever done on gerrymandering at a coffee shop in the airport. And I'll bring that to you probably sometime this week as well, because it is prescient at this point in time. So there is so much that we have to bring to you in the next few days with all these great interviews that we did that actually enlighten and, encourages and I don't believe in hope. It gives us the fervor needed to go out there and do what needs to be done. And we're going to do it. We are going to do it. I have no doubt whatsoever we're going to do it. Again, if anybody wants to give me a call and change the subject, give me a call at 281. Let me go ahead and copy paste the phone. I'm lazy to go ahead and type it out manually. Una vez más, no lo quiero hacer, así que lo voy a tener o lo voy a tratar de copiar. When I copy it, it's a lot easier and less mistakes. There we go. Hey, let me give you another joke. When I finally got to, first of all, let's see. Denver ranked second on the 2024 World Press Freedom Index. According to Reporters Without Borders, this means Denmark has one of the highest levels of press freedom in the world, just behind Norway. That's what we're talking about, and that's what we should strive to have. Beto, when Beto started the interview, before I didn't put this in the tape because it was before we actually started the interview. Beto comes up to me, and he knows me, and he knows that I am from Panama, right? And he looks at me and he said, "Lo vamos a hacer en español o inglés?" In Spanish. I'm like, let me see. Okay, let's do it in English because it's for most people. And then the last question I asked in Spanish because, again, it was sort of mostly directed to our Latino, Spanish-speaking, undocumented workers. So I did that small segment of the entire interview in Spanish with Beto. But it was, Beto was so cool about it. It's like, hey, if you want us to have this entire interview in Spanish, we can. I want to say, hey, Beto, remember I'm on KPFT. Most of the people listening only understand English, Beto. Only English. But yeah, some are going to be in Spanish for those who, do that. Anyhow, let's see. Anybody else have any other topic that you want me to touch? Because what I wanted to do is give you an update on Netroots. I got back this afternoon from New Orleans. And by the way, yes, I did have a total of probably 8 beignets. Bad. With a whole lot of powdered sugar. I hope the hotel doesn't mess me up. I try to clean all the sugar off the table, but there may be a few specks there. But I didn't go to the Café du Monde, the main one, the one in the heat. I went to the one on the Riverwalk and picked up a few beignets. But it was very, very tasty, very, very good. So anyhow, folks, like I said, this is your show. This is a show that belongs to you. So please let me know what else we want to talk about before we close this baby out. Let me know what else we want to talk about before we close this baby out. Because again, I need to go off and finish some of those interviews that I'm going to post. I'll post at least one of them tonight. I know for sure I'm going to post the Ellison, the Keith Ellison video tonight. And the other one that I really want to get out is the Delia Ramirez. She is a true progressive, and she is telling the party, get with the program, get with the program. John Davis says, yes, Beto would make a great presidential candidate. I think my hunch is that he may forego Texas governorship and shoot for 28 for the position in 28. The vibes that I was getting was one of the reasons you see him not only centralizing in Texas for this redistricting effort, but going to several red states is just because of that. Because we think there is a sea change coming for somebody to take advantage of. Things are going to be so bad that if people stop suffering in silence and people start opening up on what is actually happening to them, this is going to be a landslide, not necessarily for anybody calling themselves a Democrat. It'll be a landslide for anybody who goes out there and say, I am going to make a difference. We're up against the corporatocracy. This economic system is a failure for most. And that person, like Mandami did, everybody is talking about Mandami winning because New York is liberal. Forget that crap. The entire state of New York elected Pataki, Republican. It elected Giuliani, Republican. It elected Bloomberg, Republican. All of this is in my lifetime. New York is not as liberal as people may want you to believe. After all, it's the headquarters of Wall Street. So we often buy the Kool-Aid too easily. So let me just tell you, Mandami's going to win, not because he's a progressive, not because he defines himself as a democratic socialist, something that most Americans are, even if they don't articulate that. Again, most Americans will know, I'm not a democratic socialist. Well, do you like Social Security? Yes. Do you want child care support? Yes. Do you want care for your elderly parents? Yes. Do you want Medicaid? Yes. Do you want green energy? Do you want the government to support green energy until it is self-sustaining? Yes. You ask all those questions and they say, yeah, I want that. Folks, guess what that is? That is the definition of democratic socialism. That is what you find in Denmark. That is what you find in Sweden. That is what you find in Norway. Norway's oil goes ahead and do well for everybody. In America, our oil doesn't even go to the people who own it. We the people. They give us a pittance as tax and then take away that pittance with something called the depletion allowance. And then a few people make all the money on your oil. All those oils on the public lands, you don't really make any money for them, just the people who extract it. And then they claim, well, it's for research and development. False. We pay for the research and development at Texas A&M University, University of Texas at Austin, and all these other universities pay for these great technologies. And only when these technologies become or look viable do you see the corporations investing in them. Again, they don't take risk. So what we want are more progressives out there telling you the truth. And by the way, again, whenever I say something, if it concerns you or gives you a question, give me a call or drop me a line, because I'm always willing to discuss, explain, sometimes be corrected, because there are times that I may say something that isn't quite, maybe I said it wrong and need to make that correction, and you've heard it and you found it and you say, Egberto, you need to fix that statement, to which I will come on and say, oops, and I will. So anyway, folks, let's go ahead and give me a call if there's anything that will make your day. That is 281-823-7747. John Davis says, yes, and when they extract it, they make a mess and pollute the groundwater. Yeah. The way drilling is done, groundwater is supposed to be protected, right? Because you put a casing down, encapsulate the casing with cement. It's supposed to be in a form that doesn't come out. Let's see. Where and how did you get so informed? Gray Zebra. I'm a nerd, Gray. When I tell you I'm a nerd, I read and read and read and read. And also not only read, but I am around a lot of smart people. You guys as well. I've told many of you in this room before, I learn from everybody. Let me give you, I got a story to tell you. This morning, when I got up, I needed to get a cab to the airport. So I went ahead to the guy and I started speaking to him and I said, what should I do? Should I do an Uber to the airport? And last night when I checked the Uber, for me to get the Uber to the airport was like $40-something, right? So I didn't reserve it. I said, let's see if it gets cheaper in the morning when I do, because I try to spend y'all's money very, very efficiently, judiciously, all that good stuff. when I go on these missions, I rarely eat out. The convention usually have different organizations providing food and that kind of stuff. And that's what I'll go for. And in the case of a few days, I just go into the hotel and get me a salad. Right. But anyhow, so I called this guy up and I said, I'm not a caller. I went downstairs and I said, what's the best way to get a cab? He said, we have the taxi cabs outside of the hotel waiting for you. So $36, flat $36. And of course, the Uber was $40-something. So I said, okay, I'll go with the flat rate. Then I went in the car. I asked the guy, it's flat rate. And then I said, how is best to give you your tip? Should I put it in the account or should I give you, I didn't have any cash. Should I give it somewhere else? Because I wanted to make sure you get all the tip and it doesn't have to go to the corporation. He said, no, this is my account. I gave him I put the tip on the system. Well, as we were driving, we started to have some great conversation. And one of the things that he talked about was the disdain he had for our healthcare system, which, that is something to be expected. But most importantly, we were talking about why is it that we're so misinformed? And he, to some extent, had a bit of misinformation as well. And I just told him about the difference between independent media, progressive media, and let's say the mainstream media. And he was like, yes, I've been telling my friends this. He said, I didn't know how to say it, but I think just like you do. And that was a magical thing for me because what he said is something that a lot of us know. I didn't quite know what it is, but I actually know there was something wrong. And thank you for explaining this to me. And of course, the next thing that I told him is one of the other things that I do is I try to never, ever leave a conversation I have with somebody and not leave there knowing something I didn't know before. And sitting down with this guy in the cab, I learned about some sort of alternative medicines that he gave me his research that I needed to go ahead and do on my own as well. We sat down and talked about how to handle daughters and their mothers, right? He learned from me that daughters and their mothers are generally all one. And even though the daughter is a daddy's girl, ultimately, there's a certain bond between mother and daughter. Don't try to get involved with that. Just accept it. And he's like, oh, that's my problem. I need to do that. And then we went ahead and spoke about what driving cars are going to do to his business. And when we spoke about reducing the work week as opposed to letting these guys reduce the amount of people employed, he was like, I've been saying that. And I gave him the reason why AI is not something created by these few quote unquote geniuses on the coast or at these different companies, but AI is all of us. AI is the collective knowledge of all of us. And not only that, but AI also depended on the collective economies that we all created. And as such, AI is supposed to belong to all of us, and we must fight giving all the spoils to the wealthy. And as I'm telling him these things, he's like, I'll be honest with you. I knew that. I just didn't know how to say it. And in that regards, I was like, I am so happy about that, because when you have this guy who represents millions of working class folk who know what's wrong, they don't exactly know what it is. We have the Trumps of the world who are following the Powell memo to falsely tell them what it is that their angst is all about. And most of the times we just let it go. We think we can tell somebody something one time and it's okay. And what this guy, I think, showed this cab driver was that, no, we know it's wrong. Help us understand why it's wrong and how to fix it truthfully, not the lies that you're going to get. Judy's right. Capitalism robs working people in every way possible. And it was, both of us, it's funny. I think I hug everybody, man. By the end of the discussion, I get there. I get out of the cab. I was going to pull all my stuff out of the cab. I had a bunch of stuff, all the panels and the things that you guys see that I had to carry from the pictures. He ran out of the car as I'm trying to fiddle with the money machine, and he pulled all my stuff out and set it up good. And at the end, we just embraced, big hug, and I gave him a whole bunch of cards to kind of come on and join the PDR family, because that is how we're going to get the message out. As Amy Goodman says, we have to be there. We have got to be there. And I'm not talking about there when we're talking sometimes, I had some conversations with a few people. It's not only the interviews that I do, but I interact with a whole lot of people. And to put it bluntly, I was pretty upset with some of the people that were there. In fact, some of the people on panels, because they were more important in getting wordiology right. They wanted to show a few of them wanted to show their intellectual prowess using these kinds of words. Look, if I use a big word that I figure out nobody is understanding, I'm going to go ahead and try to explain it. I'm not going to stop using it if it expresses it more accurately. But there are some people that we got that air of, I don't want to call it privilege, but aboveness, right? And I was like, no, they can't be like that with these folks. That is why Republicans win, because they make their people believe that they are on their side, but they're not. And we are on their side, but too often we have this way of being that just does the wrong thing. Just have that air of the wrong thing. But anyway, we're coming out at 50 minutes right now, and I don't have much more to say about the convention other than let me see if there are any other stories that outside of the convention in New Orleans that I can speak. Oh, I did speak to. I have a bad story, and this is on me. I want to show you how one can make a mistake, a bad mistake. And how, when one fixes it immediately, just takes culpability right away, it's fine. The Netroots Communications, one of the Netroots Communication director came to my station and she said, we have this hip hop group that is having a commemoration, the 20-year commemoration of Katrina. Would you like to speak to them? And I'm like, absolutely. Yeah, bring them. So they brought 2 rap stars over. And unfortunately, I lost 5 interviews because Wirecast was corrupting the data. I don't understand why, but I fixed it. In fact, Beto's interview was corrupted, but I had Beto on the 2. I did a double on Beto, both on a cell phone angle and the Wirecast angle. So I was able to save Polster, Celinda Lake, as well as Beto's interview. Otherwise, I would have been in trouble. But anyway, I contacted them and asked them to do a Zoom interview subsequently. I hope they'll forgive me and do that for losing the data. But these 2 rap artists come on. And I'm interviewing them, and I introduced myself and introduced them, and I said, and we're here to commemorate. No, we're here to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Katrina. I didn't even notice how silly that statement was. Honestly, I'm talking to folks. I didn't really understand. And one of the rappers looked at me and he said, you just made a boo-boo, right? And I'm like, I did? He said, you just said you were here to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Katrina. We are not here celebrating any 20th year. Katrina was a disaster. A lot of us got killed here at Katrina. The people abandoned us at Katrina. Not only did they abandon us, but how do you celebrate a Katrina? And I looked at the brother and I said, hey, man, I am sorry. I just wasn't thinking in the right frame of that. And I just came right out, apologized, told him what I did, what I said was stupid. And immediately, that guy gave me the hand, said, don't worry about it, brother. I mean, I know, I get it. It immediately changed the tone. In other words, he respected that. He knows that it was just a semantic error. And a stupid one at that I made in calling this stuff a celebration. I'm there excited and talking to these guys and wanting to get everything right. And the mere fact I just simply went ahead and apologized, the rest of that interview went like perfectly. He had the trust in me. They said things that I know some of the things they probably didn't want to say that I'll probably, if I kept the interview, I would have probably cut out. But it was a great interview after that, because the trust was built and they were so comfortable, and we talked and we BS for a little bit in the interview. And that's another funny story that I had. Another one that I had was a guy that was talking about, this one I better not talk about. I don't think this one wouldn't be a good one to talk about. So, but anyway, altogether was a good conference. And I'm going to be bringing all those interviews to you. I failed to do the 3:00 shows. I honestly couldn't do it. The interviews were so scattered that the flow wasn't there. And the way we were on the floor, there are times that I had to flag folks or people were late to get there and I had to be ready because they had to be out on a flight. So I just couldn't get the coordination of the times to work for the 3:00 show. And I think the next time what I'll do is I will probably go ahead and have a show taped for the Friday and Saturday that I know I'm going to be at Netroots. And well, actually the Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday that I know I'm going to be there. It's going to be in June next year. And if everything works out right, we'll be there as well. All right, guys, it's 55 now. And I think it's time for me to say these programs on Sunday nights or Saturday nights, the weekend, Politics Done Right, it's really here for our paid subscribers. But right now we're trying to grow our base. So we have opened it up. For the next few weeks to try to ask those of you who have the wherewithal to do so to please become paid subscribers of our channel. I think you're going to see the value in it. And as Amy Goodman said, it is so important for all of us to keep independent media alive and funded. As you know, Donald Trump has killed all the funding for public media. And, we are doing our best. I would play if I had more time, I would play the Amy Goodman's piece again. But I tell you what, I may go over a tiny bit today. Let me play the Amy Goodman piece again, because I think it's bear mentioning. And she gave both KPFT and Egberto, myself, a shout out. So since a lot more people came since I played it, let me go ahead and play it again, and then we'll end. But I want to ask all of you, those of you who have the ability, please become paid subscribers by going to politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. And I'm going to put that in the chat in a bit, politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. Egberto, ¿dónde está esa cosa? Déjame encontrarlo. Let's see. politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. If you have the wherewithal, support what we do. We work very hard. By the way, the trip was a bit more expensive than we thought. But again, we know that you will come with your support. politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. Please support independent media best you can. And you can start by being a paid subscriber of our newsletter at politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. Okay, I think I've got to check out. Stay woke, my dear brothers and sisters. I'm coming out in a few hours, maybe an hour or two, with the interview I did with Keith Ellison. You're going to love that interview. It's not just about, in fact, it's not going to even cover any of the Minnesota riots, etc. We're covering what's real. Anyhow, I am going to check out of here. I want to thank you all for sticking with me. Love you all. Once again, please become paid subscribers to help us defray our costs. That is what we need to ensure independent, progressive media survives to tell the truth. Thank you so kindly. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. on KPFT. What am I going to talk about? Of course, we're going to talk some about the Netroots Nation, but who else? Who knows what else? But please be there. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for letting me in on a piece of your Sunday. Have a wonderful day. Love you all.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.